Okay, guys, careful the wires here. Okay, careful wire. Wire.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Right, stop here.
Okay.
Because they're streaming the video, so they would like you to stand there. That's possible.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen and Mr. Chair, the problem with people who don't work that we give them financial incentive for them to actually work, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we are trying to provide you. But a few problem statement in today's debate. We believe that we are going to debate in a developing world because of why the problem in developing world is that feminism is not fully upheld, especially in a patriarchal society like Pakistan. Secondly, we believe that the workforce is important for the developing world to actually cater to a society to actually be economically stable. But also, we believe that the main problem here today, that there's lacking of workforce, and because women don't actually work in today's debate. But also, we believe on how we clarify females are in the workforce is that females who work, meaning to say that any type of workforce, we will financially reward them. Our case setup is simple in today's debate. We give money towards this household, and also we'll give them monthly like a salary, but instead we give it towards this household. But instead we'll give it to the household. But also, our safety net in today's debate is that we set up a regulation bodies in which these regulation bodies will actually ensure the flow of the money, which won't be monopolized by anyone at the end of the day. But before I answer the biggest question in today's debate, yes.
Number one, you have to answer the question why specifically you're going to pay the entire household and not the women themselves. But number two, would you also force corporations to have a certain quota of accepting women or paying corporations to accept women?
Okay, ma'am, you have to understand why we pay the household. Because firstly, because if we pay the women directly, then it is a form of inequality where both men and women work in the same workforce, but the women are getting more. Therefore, when we want to uphold equality, we actually pay towards this household. But I'll clarify more into my issue today. Okay, firstly, I'll talk to you on why would household be eroded when females penetrate the workforce. The problem statement here is simple, because working force is important in the developing world, and our incentive to women. Sit down later on. We give incentive to these women, because why? Because what are the because why they should be eroded? Because firstly, they are increasing the workforce, in which it will benefit the country economically, and also in developing countries, workforce are unable to excel when they are. You have to understand that in developing world like Pakistan, where the society there is patriarchal, people don't let women to actually work, and therefore we believe that it is detrimental. But also, we believe that we will empower women inside the workforce when we financially reward households whose females are actually in the workforce at the end of the day. But also, to the second question, where the importance of rewarding the household. Yes, last one.
You haven't answered Eliza yet. Are you going to pay these corporations or impose some kind of a quota to make sure these women even get employed in the corporations?
Okay, okay, to put up some form of gender equality inside this corporation. We don't care. We believe that inside the society itself, where the problem here is actually the women who don't work. Therefore, if they work for any type of corporation, we don't care about gender equality inside that corporation, but instead we care the whole workforce of that nation itself. But also, what are the importance of rewarding the household? Because we are going to help them with the family. Because of why? When women are actually in the workforce, they face the two main problems in today's debate. Firstly, they now have two responsibilities in which they have the responsibility at home and also in the workforce. And also they might be discriminated at their workplace and things like that. Therefore, we reward them because we financially aid them. Because when they have two responsibilities, it's actually harder for them to take care of both. Therefore, when we financially aid them, it will eventually be not a it will not eventually be a problem for them to actually work, because they don't work because they think that they have to take care of the family. But now that they work, they will save extra money for them to actually cater towards their family also. This form of money could be used to hire a maid or to send to a daycare, and therefore we believe on that problem we stand. But also on how we believe that they won't be discriminated anymore when people actually know their capability. When we incentivize them to go into the workforce, when they have worked into the workforce, we believe that men will actually know their capability of actually working, doing the same job as him. Therefore, at the end of the day, equality will be upheld, and that is what feminism stands. Even if government has no female representation. But also, we believe that there should be an appreciation from the state. Firstly, because of why? Because these women needs to be recognized by the state. Because let me put you in a simple picture where in a particular society, where in a developing world, women don't actually work, and the government actually have a problem with lacking of workforce. When we get to empower women and women actually go into the workforce, the state have to recognize them. By how? By financially rewarding the household and helping them actually. Therefore, we believe that there will be no form of discrimination on our side, because now we are saying that the state recognizes this as an important thing. The state recognizes this as a form of development of whole society economically and also equality. But also, even if you were trying to say that in a typical society or anything, these women will actually be discriminated, we don't think so. Because when we show the recognition of the state, the society will eventually accept them at the end of the day. When the state have already shown the importance, it will be a societal norm that women are also important in the workforce. Like how in Malaysia, which we are different from Pakistan, we are not patriarchal in today's debate. But let me give you a simple example of how the state are the moral arbiter inside, and they can eventually produce a societal norm. Like how in countries like Netherlands, like how they legalize prostitution, and in that particular country, eventually prostitution is accepted at the end of the day with legal terms. But where do we stand in today's debate? We believe that form of incentive is actually important towards the developing world, and therefore we don't see any clear harms inside today's debate. We provided you equality, we provided you recognition, and we also help you to cope with your family together. But also, we answered the biggest question in today's debate of why would household be rewarded when females penetrate the workforce, and secondly, the importance of actually rewarding the household. And therefore, with all this answered, side government will win this debate. Thank you.
It's funny how like government wanted to fight for social equality and allow for women to come out of their shells and the identity that everyone else wants them to embrace, and yet they were the ones that were stigmatizing against women, because we tell you that women can have any kinds of ideals and identities that they want. If I want to work, then I will sure as hell go out and work, Mr. Speaker. But their characterization is that, oh, women only want to stay at home. Even if women only want to stay at home, we don't see why there's a problem with that. If that's the identity that women want to embrace, then sure, go ahead. But we don't think that's the identity that most women have, because we have to understand that women are diverse. That means certain women will want to stay at home and take care of their children, but they're also going to be, and then places like in Korea, where the main workforce in the corporate world is women to begin with. But there are also places like Saudi Arabia, where women are fighting for their rights to be able to drive and to be able to go out without always being tied back to their patriarchal lines and to their husbands and brothers. We think it is the perfect example of women wanting to go out. But we're going to tell you, even if it's a harm in that situation where patriarchal societies are always linked to their husbands or towards men, it's still harmful under their policy, even though it wasn't their problem statement to begin with. No, but really, if you analyze their case was jobs are available, and there's no stigma against them whatsoever. Women can always get these jobs, and there's always accessibility. If in that situation it does happen, then we think there's no problem if women actually get on your side. The only problem on your side is that you are actively telling women that you're not allowed to stay at home, you're not allowed to embrace the identity that you want, and that's extremely harmful when states propagate the idea of a certain identity and ideal that women have to have, and that's not something we can agree with, because their characterization was extremely narrow. They said that they were stereotyping women that they only want to stay at home and work, and we don't think that's necessarily true. What is side opposition fighting for? We believe that an active encouragement to a certain identity and ideal of a woman is an active discrimination against another, because we tell you that if you are actively telling a woman that you have to work, that means you are actively telling women that you can never be in the household, and that's harmful to the ability of the woman to propagate her own identity. Before my three arguments, yes.
That's how we're forcing women to work. Again, we send a message and incentive for them to work. No one obliges them to work.
Exactly. Current status quo, women already do want to work. That's what you need to recognize. Women want to work, but under status quo, there are certain barriers. But this whole idea of patriarchal society, in which women, maybe there may be problems in the ability for them to enter certain corporations. That's why we asked the POI whether you will force certain quotas on corporations. Which, if they don't want to force certain quotas on corporations, then their whole stance is self-defeating, because women, even if you incentivize them to come out to the workforce, they will never get any jobs in the first place. But if you set certain quotas, we think it's still extremely harmful, because you delegitimize the ability of women, because women won't get the opportunities that women also should get. But so that's the first rebuttal, right? The second rebuttal on the idea of paying households. The reason why we asked this was because they said that they wanted to uphold equality. Number one, we think it's particularly harmful when you pay the households as a whole, because you make women the objectified in those households, whereby this woman is an avenue in which I can get more money. That's why I will push her to go towards the workforce. We think it's even more harmful when you allow for people in the household to objectify those women in that situation. But lastly, on the idea of state being an arbiter, we concede and we agree the state needs to be an arbiter. But in that situation, the state needs to make a value-neutral decision in which they support all kinds of identity of women. Your harm ultimately is telling women that they must be a certain identity, and that's extremely harmful to your side. The idea of recognition by the state will be in my argument today. Number one, the necessity of this policy. Number two, how it is a coercive decision and an illegitimate decision to begin with, and number two, how it translates to women's psyche and society as well. Because we think that you need to understand that that in a lot of places, women ultimately do want to you have to understand that top-down approaches don't work in many situations, especially in patriarchal societies. We give the example of South Africa in the apartheid, whereby it was a grassroots level approach, and Maoris, how they fought for their own rights. It was all from the grassroots level. It all has to be coming from the will of the women themselves. And if the woman doesn't want to embrace either identity you're forcing them to embrace, we don't think it's actually going to work, because we don't think the woman will actually be properly making the decision, but moreover being coerced into that decision. No, sit down. But when women come out of the household responsibilities into the working field on their own, that's when the decision is legitimate. That's when the policy really works, because your policy is merely forcing them. It's never, and they will never have the true incentive to want to embrace the identity. So we don't think there's an actual reason why you should do so. But secondly, how is this a coercive decision? No, because we tell you that because it's a coercive decision, you harm the ability for women to form their own identity. Why is this so? Because what happens when you give certain money, give money as an incentive? Number one, you propagate the idea that women's identity can be bought by the state, and that's particularly harmful, because that means that I can always tell a woman to stay at home and she will buy the identity. That's extremely harmful to begin with. But number two, especially for poor women, they're susceptible to these kinds of things. But number three, how we believe that money is a great thing, and even if it's moderate or rich people, they will also always want money. For how we're doing this is that you give the families the ability to, you give the women forcing them to conform towards the identity that the state is forcing them to take, and they can never say no, because then they will be deemed as a harmful member of the family that doesn't want to help the family in getting more benefits. Ultimately, you inflict the inability of them to propagate these ideas. But moreover, how it is not in line with the feminist movement and how you harm the feminist movement is this. The three main pillars of the feminist movement is, number one, equal opportunity, how they are always against institutionalization of discrimination, and number three, how they always want to form their own identity. Ultimately, you principally contradict all those situations in which the woman always want to propagate her own identity and how she must always do so. But lastly, how you harm the society and women's psyche, right? Because we tell you that, number one, women are seen as a crutch in these families, whereby using this crutch to get into those situations. Ultimately, corporations or people that employ them will never see and deem them as someone that should be there to begin with, because they're only there because of the money. But number two, states is legitimizing and conceding to the fact that a patriarchal idea is placed on these women by saying that these women don't want to work and cannot work, or these people cannot make choices, and that's why as long as we give them money, they will make those choices. So ultimately, you show the idea that women are weak and always susceptible to state and money, and that's extremely harmful, because identity of women can never be independent in that situation. But lastly, the state is setting certain standards on the good identity of a woman. Everything is particularly harmful. But we think it also affects the psyche of a woman herself, whereby she believes then that she is being lazy for staying at home, or she is not good enough if she wants to choose the identity to stay at home and take care of her kids. So that's harmful psyche, because we think that identity is something that's subjective, that every woman should be able to pick for should propagate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let's go.
Wait. Okay. Side opposition here assume that we are suddenly now going to force women to go to work, because they say that it is not a necessity, since women are already going to voluntarily do so. And they give an example on Saudi Arabia, also on Korea, in which these countries are already okay with the women's capability to actually enter that workforce voluntarily. But with our case setup, we talked about patriarchal countries in which these women are not incentivized to even enter these workforces, because they are emotionally insecure for them. They are emotionally insecure to even work in these workplaces because of how man portrays them in the first place, and also because of connotations from other members of society in which they always tell them that they are unable to work in the workplaces as same as men. Then therefore, we think that we need to give them penetrate that workforce and enter the same workplaces as men. And this is the case that we would like to provide to actually give the incentives for these women to finally work with that man and show the capability of them to be equally as men as themselves. Then therefore, we think our case still stands in today's debate because we recognize a problem in which these women have the problem of insecurity inside patriarchal states. And therefore, we need to push them to actually enter these workforces and show them that they are capable to be as equal as men. But then let's move on with a few rebuttals, right? In which they keep on questioning us, who would pay the women in the first place, right? Well, it's obviously the state, because we tell you that it's a main arbitrary to uphold its responsibility as minorities, not the companies. But then they actually ask us, are we now going to put quotas on these companies to actually allow women to be much more absorbed into their workforces, right? We tell you no, because if the woman is already capable enough to actually enter that workforce, then go to interviews and even be accepted by the corporation, then therefore they are okay. We are not actually inserting any quotas. But now our mechanism is just to incentivize women with financial supports towards the household for them to actually incorporate inside the corporation, right? But then here's the other situation here, in which they say that now we're going to jeopardize the selection of the identity of this woman, because this woman doesn't want to even stay at this household. But then here's the problem, in which we already contextualize this to a patriarchal state, in which this situation, the women in this country, where they have a responsibility in which because of say that the selection of identity coming from society upon these women is just to stay at home. Coming from side government, we do not support that. We want women to actually go out and work out and to actually go out and work inside workforces and also in workplaces, same as men, right? But then here's the problem, in which they cannot do so. But then we're not trying to say that we're trying to brainwash them and say that this is your identity, because right now we also want them to go into workforces, but because in patriarchal states these women will still be the main caretaker of their family, then therefore the state will also give them financial incentives to actually help them, to actually help the family that they have responsibility to take care. They to women be degraded, right? We tell you this is absolutely not true, because right now the companies' trust towards women wouldn't actually be degraded if they actually see these women get financial incentives from the state in the first place, right? Because we tell you that these corporations also are in the same line with the state as well, as they act as a neutral body, because their whole interest is to only gain profit making, not to oppress women. But the problem is that women cannot even penetrate those corporations and work as work in the same equal workplace as men, right? Then therefore companies' trust towards this woman wouldn't be degraded at all, and therefore we think that is a simple absurd assumption in the first place, right? And therefore but then there's another question: will men take over the money at the end of the day? We tell you no, because coming from Adlan's speech, we've already told you that there's going to be an inspective regulatory body to even go, and therefore we tell you that even that this to the family's household and not towards the man to abuse it. But even if it goes to the man, then therefore the man, because of these regulatory bodies, the man would still spend it on the family, and therefore it's beneficial for the household and also for the women inside of it, right? But because of this, that this money will still be channeled towards the family's household, then therefore these men don't even have an incentive to abuse the money in the first place, right? Your assumption is also not accepted in today's debate. Before I move on to my substantives, yes.
Corporations are as unbiased and as loving of women as you say, why is it that you have that problem statement that women want to work but they can't?
Because of men's portrayal of women inside the workplaces in the first place. They are emotionally insecure of working at the same place as men, because when they are working in those kind of workplaces, men actually degrades them and actually tells them that they are unable to work as the same level as them in the first place, right? It's not the company's fault. It's the members of society that there's the member of society that works in those kind of workplaces, right? Okay, so now let's move on into my substantives, in which I'll talk to you how it's going to improve the image of the country in the feminism sphere. But why is this important? Because right now, we need to strengthen the country's image, because we say movements rhetorically condemns the countries, especially for those countries who have patriarchal problems, right? Such as when the amount of women in this kind of workforces are really less than compared to men, and therefore it portrays capable of being equal as men in the first place. And therefore, countries that are aware of the condemnation from this feminist movement looks at this and also supports the feminist movement's ideology. And therefore, the state's image is destroyed. But we tell you, this is very harmful because it gives effects towards this country where it jeopardizes the diplomatic ties and also the economy where the tourism sector is also jeopardized. And also it jeopardizes socially as well because right now, people look at this kind of society inside this country as patriarchal and therefore treatments towards different, including religion of the people in the country themselves, such as like Muslim, such as like Islams. When people actually see the country that represents Islam, such as like Pakistan, they condemn the religion that they actually practice as well, right? And we think this is very harmful. But now, how do we solve this problem? By showing the capability of state to elevate women as equal as men. Now we show that we are also supporting the feministic ideology because we also want that kind of effort to achieve those kind of equality. And then therefore, we tell you the feminist movement would stop rhetorically condemning this nation, and also it complements the nation as well. And at the end of the day, the state's image can be protected alongside the religion that it also symbolizes. Then therefore, it wouldn't have any problems. We wouldn't actually face any problems with the manipulation and also misinterpretation of religion, right? Because there's something that we would like to avoid. And benefits. Government still stands in today's debate in creating equality. And because of this, we also want to improve the image of the country because we don't want to any forms of manipulation over ideologies. Therefore, we are proud to propose.
A very confusing side government in today's debate. They had a few characterization shifts throughout the first speaker and second speaker. Let me tell you this characterization shift. Firstly, they said there are many available jobs in this developing country and women should be incentivized to go out. Firstly, that's already an ideological, there's already an ideological leap there, right? If there are already many available jobs in the country, why don't women want to go and work in the first place? So that's a concession that women don't want to be a working woman to be their identity to begin with. They want to be housewives under those circumstances, and that should be the identity that we maintain under outside. But what is the characterization they talk about? He said that companies don't abuse women, they're just profit making. But following that POI, he literally considered that, hey, no, they face abuse by men in the workforce. So which characterization is it? We want you to stick with one. But furthermore, let's go into my 3 rebuttals before I move on to my own case. Firstly, he said it gives incentive to women. I already told you how they can already join it if there was no abuse to begin with. But secondly, if you agree that money would be incentive, you also agree that it's a coercive force. Therefore, women who don't want to work in the first place would be forced to work by the very fact that money is coercive force towards the household, and when men in the household itself want the woman to gain more money and view it as commodity, which is what Eliza told you about under those circumstances, which was never taken down by the DPM. Secondly, he told you that the recognition and appreciation by the government is extremely important. But firstly, it's only a recognition that women are lazy and they don't want to work unless they get paid. And I think that's a very harmful recognition by the stance of government, because you legitimize all forms of patriarchal stereotypes towards that woman in that society. But furthermore, it's a double standard, because you further discrimination when men in a household say that I have 3 sons who are working and contributing to the workforce, but my neighbor who has only 1 daughter is getting paid more than me. That's a double standard, and it only increases the discrimination towards women in that country. That's harmful. But thirdly, he said that, well, we want to make it a societal norm. He never told you it equates to societal acceptance. Acceptance, right? Because they told you, right, that acceptance, sorry. Yeah, they told you, right, that you cannot change the mindset in the workforce and you cannot change the mindset in society. He considered to that, right? So we don't see how that can potentially change, even if you give women economic benefits under this situation. But even if it could potentially change, women need state crutches to be in the workforce now, and it will look at us as weak, look at as lazy people, rather than look at us as people who are legitimate in the workforce. I'll rebut the DPM's 2 ideas of emotional insecurity and discrimination in the workforce in my second argument, and I'll rebut his idea of the feminist movement increasing the image of, potentially improving the image of the country in my first point today. But before I move on, any points of rebuttal? No? Okay, let me move on to my points today. Firstly, how you make feminism a divisive idea, and this tackles the DPM's point, right? Because not only in these patriarchal societies do women get discriminated by men, but now you allow the working woman to actively discriminate against women who don't want to be a working woman, to be their identity. Why is this harmful? Because these women who want housewives to be their identity is now deemed as less progressive, hindering feminism, hindering the potential progress of the country itself. They become the victims of the very feminist movement who should be protecting them. They get shamed, they get ridiculed, they get ostracized by the feminist movement, by the women themselves. This is where women themselves a divisive community and is prevented from presenting a united front against the patriarchal society. This is when they fail to become united, all of women truly want, and that's harmful because now feminism won't be taken within these countries or within the international community, right? Because you allow the patriarchal society to just laugh it off. They don't even know what they want to begin with. How can they represent women when they don't even know what their identity really is? And that's harmful because you fail to persuade political leaders or fail to persuade the leaders within the country that this is a voice that they should look upon favorably, because they don't even know what the voice really is. It's so murky, they don't even know what the identity really is. And furthermore, now they're increase the perception that women won't want to opt into the feminist movement because that doesn't represent them anymore. What happens when you lack numbers in feminist movement is you lack media attention, you lack governmental pressure, you lack pressure to change policies to look favorably upon these women who you exactly want to protect under this situation. That's when you further disincentivize women from going to the workforce if they truly want to, and that's when you make women look as less progressive, look as weak within these patriarchal societies. That's when you destroy the image of the country and the feminist movement within the country itself. But my second point on how it harms women in the corporate culture. Sure.
Firstly, slow down, relax. Secondly, how do you even fix any problem? Because your kids are just telling the harms, but we already rebutted that, but you did not tell any benefits of any.
Sir, outside is the job of outside is not to prove that we are going to change the patriarchal society. We're going to make women be accepted. We're saying that by proposing this, you increase the propensity of harm that can happen upon women. You increase the idea that feminist movement will become a divisive community and can never support what women truly want. But secondly, how corporate culture will harm the woman. It looks, firstly, you already paint the idea that women are already weak and lazy. But firstly, the men in this community, if you agree that they are always targeting this woman, they'll try as hard as possible to make females fail, to empower the stereotype that women are weak. What are these discrete things, right? They discreetly set these women up for failure and public embarrassment, such as ridiculing them because they mistyped something in a document, and things like that. Such discrete things which increase public embarrassment towards this woman. But furthermore, and a bigger problem is, it's an inhibition on their identity. Because firstly, not do you only inhibit their identity and go, you make women adopt to a male culture and male idea of what a woman should be like in the workplace. What I'm talking about, women should be now seen as more aggressive in the workplace. Women should have an IFS approach in the workplace. Women should be able to accept abhorrent jokes about objectifying females when they're drinking beer with their male counterparts in the workplace. Why is this so? Because that's the only way they can climb up the social ladder within the patriarchal society, Mr. Speaker. Because that's harmful ideology which you force women to take in order to progress in the patriarchal society. Because in order for them to continue providing money for their family by allowing the state to pay them, they have to climb up the social ladder. They have to be seen as relevant in that workforce. If they don't adopt these male identities within the workplace, they'll be deemed as irrelevant. They'll be sacked the first thing the manager sees them as, like someone who cannot adapt within the working place. And when they fail to adapt, they can never change the mindset of the patriarchal society. That's what they already considered to, right? So there'll be an active discrimination who women who don't want to adopt into that male identity and who just work as hard but just cannot break through in that social and corporate ladder. And we think that's extremely harmful when you delegitimize the efforts of don't want that you place, whether structurally, historically, or culturally, because men were there working that workforce to begin with. So we think that's extremely harmful, where you don't tackle the very burdens you set upon yourselves, where you increase the harm for women if to be discriminated in the workplace and to be targeted because they're emotionally insecure because they have a higher tendency to fail. That's exact characterization, that exact stereotype which you empower in society. We don't want to empower that on side opposition. We beg to oppose.
So firstly, just to point out a contradiction, kind of funny to see from Evan's speech already admitting that women have a higher tendency to fail in front of men. Well, we think that is an active form of discrimination already and disregardment of women's rights, but which was integrated into his argument, right? But moving on to the first issue of today, will this model be effective at empowering women from the first basis, right? Side opposition have kept arguing the fact how women cannot work, and now you'll aware them as being lazy, right? First response, we tell you corporations are profit-oriented in the first place. They never prove to us how corporations will suddenly want to favor men over women, as we see that corporations always just want to make funds and to generate money. This proves to you that there'll be no gender judgment, but they'll take what's the best for them because that's just their only interest, which is to make money in the first place. This proves to you that women in status quo can actually get a job, but the problem that is stopping them from getting a job is the active discrimination by men. This is why we tell you that our proposal is so needed in today's status quo, Mr. Speaker, sir, which was just to give them a push and an incentive, or maybe even an excuse for these women to get out of the house to go and actually work in the first place. We tell you that if corporations are profit-oriented, women always have a chance. They are just not given the chance by men, but corporations do give them this chance. We don't see how they say that corporations are suddenly gender biased, right? But also, they've been questioning us, why do we give it to the household in the first place, right, Mr. Speaker? Because we tell you that it will still be beneficial even if you give it to the household. How? We told you that if a female is in the workforce, we will reward the households. But why? Because we tell you at the end of the day that even if they don't give it only towards the woman in the first place, they give it to the household, there'll still be set up these regulation bodies under our model, right? We told you that this will ensure that the money is used for familial and only household users in the first place. Therefore, we don't think that their whole case of monopolization of the men towards this money will even happen in the first place. But how will it still be beneficial to women? Because the woman is still part of the household, and because we have these regulation bodies to deter any misuse of the money and to always regulate where the money goes in the first place, the men won't be able to misuse this money or abuse it. He'll be able to use it for the benefit of solely on the woman or the benefit of the household as a whole, which also benefits the woman. This is how we still benefit the woman, right, Mr. Speaker, sir? Not yet. But also, when they talked about us objectifying the woman until the man forces the woman to go out, right? We tell you that that won't even happen in the first place. Status quo is patriarchal, but it's not lawless, meaning to say that if you actually actively force a woman to go out to work, then it's already against the law. What we need here is to enforce the laws under status quo against gender oppression, which is by enforcement of law and just making legal protection much more further, not disimplementing our motion, right, Mr. Speaker, sir? But we tell you objectifying women, even if this happens, right, we tell you it won't because it has a lot of mitigation factors. But worst case scenario, and it does happen, we tell you that, of course, all policies take a long time to work. Nothing will work at the start. No social change will actually seem positive in the early stages of it. We tell you we need time, and through time, we can actively change the social perception towards women at the end of the day. Yes, maybe at the start they will be objectified, but we tell you it will work in the long-term benefit. Never. So moving on to the linking onto the first issue, yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, we tell you this model will be effective in empowering women as we settle the technicalities of today and how women can actually go out. But before I move on to my second issue, yes, Eliza, last one.
Corporations have to be controlled by someone, and in most of those patriarchal societies, corporations are controlled by men. But even if they're different entities, how does suddenly encouraging women to come out will ever change the mindset of a
Yeah, but we concede to the fact that yes, maybe the CEO of the corporation might be a man, right? But we don't think that he would let that stand in his way of profit making in the first place. Corporations have never been known to create any gender imbalance in the first place. But why before this, when government have tried to set a gender quota on them, was to actually combat this active discrimination that they started to talk about in the first place. This is why we concede to the fact that yes, the CEO might be a guy, but we think that he can overcome this barricade of being a guy just to make more profit. Women can work. But also, onto the second issue of today, will this model be in line with feminism, which was a principal clash, right? Firstly, they accuse us of pushing women to actually work, right? First response, never in our proposal have we said that we're pushing or coercing or even forcing women to work in the first place. We tell you that choice is apparent, which is also an important constituent of feminism in the first place, which is choice. We tell you you don't force, but you just give an incentive to do so. But we don't think that how an incentive just by the state is suddenly going to be as a force of coercion. There's been many cases before where the state gives an incentive to do something, but it's not seen as a force to do something. An example would be how the state gives a lot of benefits to people who buy their local products. For example, people who buy Proton, right? You get a lot of benefits with buying Proton in the first place, or all these benefits of the car and whatnot to make it much more cheaper. But we don't think that just because this is an incentive for state to tell you to buy local products, it actually proves that the state is forcing people to buy this. This is why we're not forcing people. Sit down, Eliza, I'm not taking any more. But also, when they try to talk about discrimination and its double standard, right? We tell you we beg to differ, and we're making it as a further empowerment, which I'll analyze later in my speech. But even if we create this discrimination, we tell you we don't care, because the priority here is to help women regardless. We don't care what they think. We just want the social mobility. We tell you if somebody needs help, you should help them regardless of what they think of this help, but should just help them. It's in the best interest of the state. This is our top priority here. We don't care if they feel they are being discriminated. We're just going to help them regardless at the end of the day. But also, when they try to talk, about public embarrassment happening in public, right? We told you why it's important to do this in the first place, because they have to concede to the fact that why we should recognize women who penetrate the workforce, which came from my prime minister already. We give an incentive to women to join the workforce, but now that they get money when they work, it acts as an attraction for women to actually penetrate this workforce in the first place. But now the problem here is that women actually can work, but they are unwilling to. Why? Because of the characterization of the patriarchal society. They are looked down upon and are regarded as unimportant. But we tell you this is why we need this push, exactly why we need to spark this change within women to give them an incentive to move. But how? We tell you this is how it acts as a form of empowerment. How state gives a principle or rhetorical support towards this woman, and thus improving the image of the state inside the feminism sphere. Now, we give this woman a push to actually work, and we tell you how in the long-term benefit, men will be able to view this and recognize the woman. It won't happen immediately, but in the long term, right, we'll be able to change and shift this perception of this patriarchal society in the first place, awareing men that now they see that women also can work equally as them, also can make as much income and make as much profit women as the catalyst that changed their whole mindset perception of being patriarchal in the first place, Mr. Speaker. This is how we tell you that despite what they say, we are in line with the feminism movement.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with side government is they didn't know how to put all their contextualizations together, because in PM and in WHIP and in DPM as well, sometimes women were too lazy to go out to work, and sometimes women felt stigmatized by the men in the workplace. But at the core of it all, they tried to tell us that it was the corporation's fault, right? That it was the people there who didn't want to employ them. But they have never answered the question of why on earth these corporations would be incentivized to change their ways and get these women. Because the only thing that we heard from them was that corporations were profit oriented, and therefore they would hire these women regardless, right? But first of all, we think that in patriarchal societies, like, these women already get much less education anyways, right? It's not really profit oriented if they wanted to hire them. But on a second level, we think that in patriarchal societies specifically, men equals profit there, right? Because they already have this idea in their minds that men will make me more money, right? And that's why, like, even if they're profit oriented, these women don't necessarily get to be hired. It doesn't matter if they make these women want to be hired, it's whether or not these men want to hire them, and they've never provided us with any analysis as to how that will happen. But now there's three questions after the first. First, should the state actively incentivize women to work? Second, does this progress the feminist movement, or what happens to the feminist movement? And thirdly, what are the long-term repercussions upon society? Firstly, should the state actively incentivize women to work? Because basically they told us that we need to empower them to make these choices, right? That women either didn't want to work or they wanted to and they couldn't. But what's still typical, right? Because, like, we think that women can choose to work or not, right? The problem here is that they're ignoring the idea that once the state pays for something, that means they are encouraging it, which means that they condemn people who do not do so. For example, when the state imposes sin taxes on things like smoking, out because we do these kind of things because we have campaigns against it. That's why we look down on people who smoke. That's why we look down on people who drink. It may not necessarily be explicit that the state will say, guys, let's all discriminate against the woman who decides not to work but stay at home because she loves her children. But it's an implicit thing that happens, right? Because people feel that the women who don't choose to work are either a stumbling block to the feminist movement because they don't want to move forward with their ideals, or that these women are simply lazy and don't want to progress with their family, right? But let's look also at like the idea of why the state should do so, because the PM tried to say that there were not enough workers, right? But like we think that if that were the case, then corporations should incentivize all workers, right? Not just the women, which they already do. But like the idea was also that the state should be the moral arbiter to decide the kinds of things that people should do, right? But we think that like what the state needs to incentivize, therefore, is a free identity, right, which is part of the 3 pillars of the feminist movement, which is something that they never wanted to engage upon, right? The idea that Eliza brought to us that they violate all 3 of them, right, which I'm going to talk about in the second idea. But yeah, we don't think that the state should actively incentivize that, especially when all these harms happen to the women. But second idea, does this progress the feminist movement? Because they try to come about, but they never gave us any analysis as to how that would happen. They just said it would happen in the future, right? Because we don't think that economic benefit, especially when it only goes to the women or only to their families, will mean societal change, right?
Yeah.
Because like you're not incentivizing these corporations in any way to want to accept them more. You're just telling them if a woman comes to you for an interview, it's more likely she's only coming because she's getting money from the government, right? And that's the kind of harmful rhetoric that you allow these corporations to have, that you validate, considering already we're in a patriarchal society where these men already want to strengthen the idea that these women are weak. Now, when you allow them to be the interviewers and you let them come and see these people and you allow them to say, oh, you're only here because you're getting money from the government, and that's not a good thing, right? But I looked at the idea of the country's image, which Bo tried to talk about. He told us that they wanted to protect it by supporting the country's image, right? But how are they doing that when they're breaking all 3 pillars of feminism? 3 of them, right? First of all, institutional discrimination, right? Because now they're giving these women crutches. They're telling people the only reason why she even came for this interview because we put her on a crutch because we paid her too. But the second thing was on the pillar of identity, because these women are now either forced into an identity they may or may not have wanted, or they are stigmatized if they choose to retain an identity of a housewife, something that they value, right? So valuing the idea that they want to take care of their children, who they seem to be the greatest priority. But the third and most important pillar is that of equality, right? And they feel as if these are the only party that needs to be incentivized. It's totally not equal, right? But what did we talk to you about on the idea of the feminist movement? What exactly is a coercive decision, right? We told you that what happens in it is that considering that the state now makes a new stereotype of what a true woman is, what happens is you're deemed as a stumbling block, as I said just now, right? These women feel demonized by other women, by the state even, when they choose this other choice. As a whole, we already told you that it's much better if you want the feminist movement to improve grassroots, right? Like things like Korea, Germany, even some African states. We think that that's something that can definitely happen in the long term, maybe for these patriarchal societies, but cannot happen when you condemn these women to the idea that even the state thinks that they're weak, even the state thinks that they wouldn't be able to go out for interviews any other way. But before I move on, yes.
Is it better to succumb to the woman when you claim that there's this discrimination rather than just taking active action in trying to empower them much more better?
But you're not empowering them anyway, because you're not making sure that they get employed in the first place. You're just incentivizing them to go for these job interviews that they may not even get through, right? But let's look at the idea of the long-term repercussions, because they told us that they'll be able to balance their homework, right, and their families will value them more. But the only thing that they do is objectify, right, the duties of women at home. They're telling us that simple money is enough to replace your work at home. You could have just paid for a role, something like that, right? They in fact cheapen the work that a woman does at home by saying, if you go out, then that's enough. You wouldn't even need it at home if you were rich, right? We think that it's much more than that. But even more than that, we think that they in fact objectify, right, the value of a woman. They say to us that the family would have only valued the woman if she gave them money, as opposed to the amount of love and all the hours that she puts into cooking, cleaning, and just listening to her children when they come back home, right? And we don't think that that's something that we're willing to stand for. But we also talked to you, Evan talked to you on the idea of corporations, right? That like they're already biased, and that they don't change, right, even when you see it. But the problem here is this: when you force women to go into an identity like this, they don't have the willpower to stand as a woman. And this is what Evan tried to talk to you about. They try the easiest way, right, which is the proven way, to be a man. And that's something that we don't want to see in society today. Please don't condemn women to the side, because we're not. Thank you.
Three reasons why side government lost today's debate. Number one, a few contradictions I need to point out. They never really clarified whether there was abuse in the corporation or not. Because the first speaker said there was, and that's the problem statement they made. But the second speaker conceded that there was no discrimination within the workplace, and therefore corporations are merely profit-oriented. But we think that was carried on by Whip as well, and he tried to clarify it, but didn't really work out for him. Because we believe that if this, the next question that we should then logically lead to is, if there was no discrimination in the workplace and many available jobs to begin with, why do we need an incentive for women to go and work in the first place? The answer which Eliza provided was this: that women didn't want to work even with all those benefits because it wasn't their identity. And now you're coercing them and forcing them into their identity, and we thought that was harmful, never rebutted by their side. But the idea is this: if they really thought that women weren't working because there was just emotional insecurity which was targeted by men in the workplace, then that will contradict your whole case, and your case would have fell flat at that very point. So second reason why they lost is they didn't feel there are very two burdens they set out for themselves. What were these two burdens? Number one, they wanted societal acceptance in this patriarchal society, and they believed that economic benefit would lead to societal acceptance. And number two, they wanted to develop a developing country by making women join the workplace. How did they fill these two burdens? Number one, they will magically appear when there was, because we told you this, it will merely exacerbate the perception of society towards them when you make them look like it's state crutches upon them and make them look lazy. What are the two things that we told you? Number one, that the state legitimizes these harmful stereotypes by using this policy and saying that we recognize that women are lazy, and therefore they only work when we provide them with money. That was something that was never rebutted. But secondly, they were seen as a double standard within the patriarchal society, because males don't get this benefit, and therefore it's more likely to think that they'll have a backlash towards these women when they don't, because they don't receive this benefit, but women receive this benefit, and we don't think that was something they're willing to stand by as well. So there's no response towards those responses, so we believe that burden wasn't proved to begin with. But second burden, they told you how they wanted to develop developing country by making women join. They never force could magically change the GDP of the country and could magically turn a developing country into a developed country. Because we told you this, it's safe to assume, if that was your line you're going with, that there will be a large exodus of women into the workforce, and there was a large exodus of women to improve into the workforce to improve the economy that they wanted to talk about. Then that means that there will be exploitation, there will be coercion of the women to join that workforce, because if there weren't, they were seen as hindering the progress of the country. They were seen as individuals who are lazy just because they just wanted to stay at home. And that was harmful characterization which they never wanted to tackle throughout their bench. But third reason why they lost, and this is the most important, I guess, that they didn't want to tackle all of harms, right? They were very dismissive, right? They thought our only house the money, and all three speakers focus on tackling that. But that wasn't our main contention. Our contention. Number one, how you make the feminist movement look divisive, and how they'll never be relevant in the patriarchal society and never be able to stand up against the aggravation that the patriarchal society puts them through. But number two, how women are being forced into identity which was never their own to begin with. And it was specifically harmful and was painted in 4 minutes of substantive analysis, which was never really rebutted throughout the case. They just said that women can work because there's no discrimination. We just want to get them to work by incentivizing them. Then I told you how the characterization already fails, but never really want to rebut it at its core. But thirdly, how it harms the women who didn't want to work in the first place, who are now actively discriminated in the workplace itself. They never consented towards those harms because they never wanted to opt in the first place. You're coercing them to join the workforce. But the last one is this, that you make women in the society be the brunt of all the delegitimization and all the harms which the patriarchal society would put upon them. And there was something brought to you by Liza, right? That they'll be the brunt of all discriminations in society because they'll be the exact failure with society who want them to embody in this patriarchal. We said that it harms the women more through this policy. That was the only burden we took, and we think that we successfully proved that to you.
It's quite funny, that they tried to twist our characterization in today's debate, where Alan over there has already clearly explained to you that it's not a problem with the corporations actually accepting them. It's a problem of society allowing them to do so, because they already have a culture inside that country in which they refuse women to work and force them to stay in houses. Coming from side government, we would like to remove those kind of things, and therefore we provide regulations and also certain inspective bodies to actually solve this kind of problem. At the end of the day, we'll prove to you. In the first issue, will it objectify the women? Because coming from side opposition over there, they say yes, because now men will now abuse the women in coercive methods, actually force them to become a source of income. Well, that's wrong, because right now we already have an incentive for men to not do so, because we already have regulatory bodies in which we inspect this money, make sure that it goes to households in the first place. Therefore, it proves to you that this man would not abuse the women to actually coerce them to go to work in the first place, because it's a useless attempt. The money isn't going to go to the man at the end of the day. The money is still going to the household. And therefore, these women who enters these corporations and enter these workforces is not because that they are coerced, because they are voluntarily doing so in the first place. Therefore, their whole argument on choosing that state is forcing them to choose identity also false. Their whole argument on portraying them as lazy also false, because we prove to you how this is not a form of coercion, because we've already by proving to a regulatory body to inspect them so that there will be no abuse at the end of the day. Therefore, coming from side government, we are not allowing women to be objectified at all, but we're now allowing women to actually have that chance to step into the workforce and also work as equal as men. Second issue, will it increase the societal dogma if they penetrate the workforce? Coming from side opposition, male dogma coming from the CEOs who are also patriarchal. But here's the thing, these CEOs are the profit entity in the first place. Therefore, their bigger interest is to prioritize their income over connotating women. Therefore, when they actually see the best interest of increasing the workforce, when women actually steps into the workforce, then therefore they would choose this kind of incentive instead of prioritizing the societal dogma that already exists in society, right? Because the CEO of the company always wants to choose what's best for the company because he is driven by money in the first place. Then therefore we tell you that these women are still being able to penetrate inside the workforce. But even if you say that they can't, then what's the debate? What is government's burden to actually prove to you how these women can even able to even enter this corporation? That is not the debate on whether or not these women can actually enter the corporations, but it's about what is the importance of them to enter it. But then government in this issue tell you that the women's portrayal inside the workforce will be much more better, because right now when the amount of workforce of women increases inside the corporations itself, men will now be suddenly of women. Meaning to say that therefore they actually inspect the women's work and also recognize them as being capable of working as equal as men at the same time. Therefore, we tell you that abuse will also be solved at the end of the day, even if it exists in corporations, because the presence of women have already been increased and the image of women being capable as equal as men has already increased as well. But then they say that society's view on government's policy, they say this will happen because society's view on government policy wouldn't work. But then coming from our side, we already told you that government's policy here is going to give a recognition to society to actually allow them to recognize that these women are capable when they actually when the state wants to show that we want to help the women, right? Because they're already considered in the first place. They say government policy does work. Coming from Alan's speech, he said that when state tries to portray this kind of support towards women, then society in our idea that this would actually work, and therefore household, then society will also accept the idea of helping women at the end of the day, because we inform them of what is the state's interest, which is trying to uphold the women. But then will it be an equal help? Government asks you how, because this is an equal help. Because women at the end of the day still has the responsibility of taking care of the family household and also going to workplace. Therefore, the state has the right to actually intervene to this situation and help the woman in actually upholding its household. Therefore, it is a fair help, and if society understand this, they wouldn't create a backlash. Coming from this, we've already solved the issue of feminism in patriarchal societies. Coming from them, the lack of engagement and also constructive proofs. Therefore, we win.
Oh yeah, it's just a bit long. Is it like yours?
It's fine. Do you have a decision yet? No problem. Yeah.
I think because like yeah, I found out quite big issues, four main issues in this debate. First on the like societal acceptance, second on the companies around the movement and for development of the country. So the first point on the acceptance, like I got accept the on more because like they said how you will seem as if the government are only looking for the money that give. But then like the government could have also come out and said, oh, but then if they're working, the companies they also work for profit in the end. But then I couldn't see any, and the companies, although it was not a really major thing, but because they were like fighting too much of it, so I just it's a small issue, but of the case on saying how like the petrochemical companies, in the petrochemical countries, the companies are run by men, and they will also have just an element of like women being only coming from the companies just because of the money, and also study on the feminist movement issue. In the feminist movement, the women must like work on their own to get an acceptance in the society. Say showing them like, oh, you guys don't have the incentive to work, not giving you this, you have to work, and then if they uh to the incentive, they'll seem like they have good incentive place, and if they don't, they'll seem like they don't subsidize. But although the government could also have come up and said more on how like how more responses on the movement, but I didn't think that they had enough responses. And then lastly on the development of the country, government to all this development of the country, that was just one point when like the government to this, although the opposition tried to argue, but it was quite big benefit there. So with that, the opposition took three issues, so I think it was good. But of course, just want to feedback whether you so like impulsive. So
Alright, what's your name?
I
How do you spell it?
AI
A-E-I.
AI
A-I. Z-A-I.
HI
A-I. Z-A-I. Kaiser. Kaiser. Right. Well, I have top one to but I generally feel that I don't feel that this piece will probably solve by societal subject more. So that perhaps focus. So if anyone argues the role of government as probably not one aspect. So probably like one thing you can take that like not just about the number of matches, but also how you value those clashes. So it is possible that one team wins more clashes or the number of clashes each team wins. But because the other team has portrayed you that it is more important, therefore they still win. But so that you might want to take into consideration.
Oh, you right? Okay. Yeah, sure.
Do you think flexing first? That will not my base is here under base.